Darren Itopo De Bono gets sentenced to 10 years in prison over his involvement in an attempted HSBC heist. The EU is seeking clarity over Malta's new vaccine travel policy. Major developers have bid for a beekeeping license on a pristine piece of land in Malta. All this and more on today's episode of Lovin Daily. Good evening, Malta and Gozo, and welcome to another episode of Lovin Daily. I'm Julian Bonnici. Joining me today is Yannick Podge. Nowhere really else to start by the major story in the news today. Darren Itopo De Bono was sentenced to prison. Jan?
Yeah, that's right. So De Bono was sentenced to 10 years in prison after reaching a deal with the prosecution. Basically, his deal will see him spend, as we said, 10 years in prison, as well as paying a fine of 18,000 euro, as well as 11,000 euro in court expenses. And now De Bono was involved, for those of you that might not remember, was involved in the, he pleaded guilty, was involved in the 2010 failed robbery of the HSBC headquarters in Hull Ormy, one of the most dramatic robberies we've had in the country. Three men entered the headquarters with the intention of gaining access to its vault. They did not manage. As they were leaving, they were discovered by the police. It ended up in a shootout. Over 65 shots were fired. Really one of the most dramatic heists we've had in the country. Now, his guilty plea comes, funnily enough, the timing comes a day before the trial of Vince Muscat, one of his co-accused, was meant to start. Despite the fact that this case took place 12 years ago now, it's still dragging through courts. Both Darren De Bono's and Vince Muscat's trial was meant to happen last year, got delayed because of COVID, and kept getting delayed. So yeah, it comes on the eve of the start of the trial of Vince Muscat, who himself has requested 2 presidential pardons in relation to this case. He's promised to reveal the identities of 2, a sitting minister and the former minister who he claims to have been involved in the heist, Minister Carmela Abel and former Minister Chris Cardona. Both pardon requests have been rejected. It remains to be seen now how De Bono's guilty plea will affect Muscat. Repubblica and as well as Nationalist MP Jason Azzopardi, as well as many others, have raised some concerns about the decision, especially given that Darren De Bono was also accused of the attempted murder of a number of policemen who he shot at. So the 10-year sentence is very low considering the crimes he has been accused of. And obviously questions have been raised, and Repubblica have asked the AG to explain exactly why the decision was taken and what information De Bono could possibly offer. In fact, Azzopardi questioned if there was a pact with the devil in this deal being made. How do you think?
Yeah, no, I mean, it was really weird, seeing De Bono get the plea deal, as I understand, there was actually quite a strong case against him. Many people on the inside actually don't understand why a plea deal was agreed. Obviously, De Bono, much like Vince Muscat, has a lot of in-depth knowledge about this incident and a number of other incidents. We've had his name crop up in numerous court sittings, particularly in the Jorgen Fenech case. Now, people are calling for the AG to at least publish the plea deal. They did the same thing with Vince Muscat, just to put, some clarity over the entire issue. I mean, as you mentioned, obviously this case is super sensitive, given Chris Cardona and Carmela Abela's links to it. So I guess for now we're going to see, obviously, what's going to happen. When is De Bono going to testify? What is De Bono going to say? The trial against Vince Muscat, for those of you who just want a small update, it's actually been suspended because of everything that happened over the last 24 hours. It's not the last you're going to hear of this story. It's been 12 years. What's waiting a little bit longer to reach the truth. On to our next story. Malta's bumbling COVID-19 rules back in the headlines yet again. This time, the European Commission confirmed with Lovin Malta that's actually seeking clarification from the Maltese government over its upcoming travel policy with regards to Maltese vaccine certificates. for those of you who haven't been following the news at all, as of 17th January, you will require a vaccine certificate to come in and out of the country. If not, you'll have to face a 2-week quarantine period upon your return. Now, the issue comes with regards to the eligibility of vaccines on a vaccine certificate. Currently, basically, the rules state that as of 17 January, anybody who got their second dose within 3 months of that date, or anyone else who has gotten the booster, will be eligible. Everyone else who wouldn't just have a 2-week grace period before the rules come into effect. Now, the issue stems from an EU directive that's actually going to come into force from 1st February, which says all vaccine doses are valid for up to 9 months on a vaccine certificate. So, for example, if you took your vaccine 9 months before January, I think my math might be wrong, but it might be March, that date. I could be wrong. Basically, your vaccine should still be valid. This is actually completely running contrary to Maltese rules. So obviously, they're going to need to seek some clarification. The reason the EU came up with these common rules is simply because across the EU, so many different member states have so many different rules that they're really just looking to create sort of a coherent, system across the entire EU. My personal opinions on it, I'm not really surprised, in the sense Malta's COVID restrictions have always been challenged. They've always been a little bit weird. They're also actually, in my opinion, quite strong, given how many Maltese people are actually taking the vaccine or the booster. There's really no need for it, but it seems like Malta's current rules are going to have to be amended just a little bit, so stay tuned in the coming days.
Yeah, in fact, you mentioned that we've had quite a high uptake of the vaccine, and I suspect this is like there are maybe people who might not want to get it the second time now, so it's the health authorities upping the ante even more, making sure everyone gets it. That said, there are European directives and laws, it's understandable that they would ask questions, but we'll see how that develops. On to our next story. Major construction developers have submitted bids for a lands authority lease to take over a tract of pristine land on a Melliha cliff edge for the purposes of beekeeping. Paul Attard, who's one of the shareholders of GAP Developments, and his wife Lorena Attard have submitted one of 2 bids for the land, the second being having been submitted by the owner board of DB Properties. Should one of the 2 bidders will eventually be walking away with, as we said, a tract of pristine land, beautiful untouched land on the Melliha cliff edge, for less than €17,000. Obviously, one of the developers involved, as we said, GAP Developments, is quite prolific. They've been involved in a number of big projects, and this has meant that a lot of people have, questioned the intent behind this. Nationalist MP Robert Kutayer, who in fact is even from that district, has raised concerns that this might just be another ploy for them to eventually leading to development. Other residents in the area have also questioned, why and whether this will just eventually, as we said, lead to some block of apartments showing up in the area. Obviously, it could be that the site is to be used for beekeeping. We can never kind of rush to conclusions. That being said, our experience in this country has, I suppose, led us to be quite cynical about these things. In fact, there was even no consultation with the Malta Beekeeping Association, who you'd expect to be consulted if it were land being put up by the government because the country needs beekeeping. We'll see. Hopefully we're wrong. Hopefully we're just being cynical. But as we said, turns out the tendency is that we aren't.
Ironically enough, the Malta Beekeeping Association actually said it's probably better to keep the land natural over there because there are so many wildflowers and it's actually really good for honeybees in the area. At first I was skeptical when I first reported on this story. I was sort of saying, listen, there might be a chance, someone's going to actually use it for beekeeping. But seeing developers, I don't know when GAP's interest in beekeeping came along, so it's actually raised a real lot of suspicions over the deal. The land over there is actually really beautiful. We've got amazing views of Adira, Gozo, Melliha, so you can actually understand how lucrative this piece of land is going to be. Hopefully something gets done. The date of the bids closed today, but there's a parliamentary petition going, a legal letter sent to Silvio Schembri to sort of put a halt to these plans. hopefully it will. We'll keep you updated of any developments in this regard. On to our next story. The Mosta priest behind hate-filled rhetoric against the LGBTIQ plus community has been called to the police depot for interrogation pending an investigation into the comments he said online. So the story involves Father David Muscat. He's quite an infamous figure in Malta for his outspoken views, particularly very conservative. However, this time he was online comparing gay people specifically, saying that they have a schizophrenia, it's like schizophrenia, it's linking it to demonic possession. Obviously, this rhetoric came amid the case concerning Abner Aquilina, who's the main suspect in the murder and rape of Paulina Demska. Some media reports have sort of linked Aquilina to his sort of extreme Christian ideals, particularly with River of Love. Some comments boards came up and eventually we led to this moment. Archbishop Charles Leclerc has even apologized on David Muscat's behalf, while Inclusion Minister Giulia Farrugia Portelli actually personally reported Muscat to the police commissioner to open up an investigation. We're obviously going to see how this all develops. However, my personal opinion on it all, look, for David Muscat's rhetoric is abominable. In my opinion, it has no place in modern society. But pursuing a criminal investigation over a Facebook comment, for me, is just taking it a little bit too far. And unfortunately, pulling far away from the issue that actually matters, which is the murder of Pauline Demska, and the role of Abner Aquilina's life played on the murder itself, particularly its connections to River of Love. I don't know what you think, Jan. That's where I am at.
I tend to agree with a lot of these cases of hate speech that, ultimately people should have the right to say what they want. With Father David Muscat, given that he has a bit of a following, and given especially what we know about this allegedly believing he was a soldier of God, kind of having a religious leader of sorts telling people that gay people are possessed or whatever, in my mind, can lead to other incidents like we've seen. So I in that respect, I think action needs to be taken, particularly by the Archbishop. I think that just apologizing on his behalf is okay, fair enough. But I mean, I'd like to see that the Archbishop can actually say, this is not what the Church believes in, therefore you cannot kind of. I don't know what steps he's empowered to take, but it feels like there could be more than that. But yeah, as you said, I feel like at times we do kind of exaggerate a bit with hate speech. On to our final story, we're going to end with COVID, another COVID story. So a cruise liner that's been blocked from entering Malta. The cruise liner, the MSC Grandiosa, was scheduled to stop over in Malta. However, it has been blocked because of a COVID outbreak on board. Some 100 passengers out of the 4,800 on board the cruise liner have tested positive for the vaccine. Now, the crew members, all the guests are required to be vaccinated in order to get on the cruise liner. So, to a certain extent, the risk should be minimized. However, Malta has decided that the cruise liner will not be granted permission to enter Malta. It will instead continue to Palma de Mallorca, and passengers will then be tested. Those who are found to be negative will be able to fly back home, whereas those who are positive will have to quarantine on the boat.
Yeah, some people might think that's such a bad thing. The MSC line sort of also reached out after the initial story. They said actually going to continue operations as normal. So make of that what you will. Let us know what you think about that in the comments below. That's it from us for tonight, and as always, have an evening full of loving.